Hi, Boone, it's Zacharu, and welcome to another episode of the Stay True and Stay You podcast. This week, we are going to be talking about fursuiting, and with me, I think I have the perfect person to discuss all the things about fursuiting, and that is Dear Jazzie, but we'll get to her in just a moment. Real quick, I just want to plug a few things about the podcast. If you haven't already, be sure and subscribe and like the podcast. We will be publishing new episodes every 2 weeks, and if you want to support the podcast, be sure and check out the subscribe star link in the description box below where you can get early access to the podcast weeks before it goes up, because I like to do a lot of things in bulk and ahead of time, and you also get really cool rewards like, for example, exclusive content and voting power on the next topic. And for this topic, my patrons, or rather, subscribe star, we don't mention the P word here anymore. My subscribe star members, my stars, my beautiful stars, they voted on this topic. So, with me here today is the lovely and fantastic and most wonderful Dear Jazzie.
Congratulations, it's me.
It is you! Congratulations, it's you! I love this. This is the best present ever.
Oh my!
So a lot of you know Jazzie.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course, it's a pleasure to have you. I enjoy our combos. Jazzie is a fantastic being, and of course, y'all probably know her way more than me because she is the queen of the podcast and such.
Oh my goodness! You give me a lot of credit.
I mean, you're out there, girl. Like, you were out there. You were official, like a referee with a whistle.
Oh heck! Thank you. It's funny because when you're the one sitting on the other side of the editing bay, it's hard to know what the scope of your work is in the community. Like, all I see is a microphone, a soundboard, and my editing rig. I don't, it's a podcast. It's an audio medium. I don't see the multitudes out in the internet, as it were. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Of course. So Jazzie, plug all your things. Let the world know, for those of you who don't know, which it's very unlikely I don't know, but just in case they don't.
Literally everything you could ever want to know about me is on @oddswithgod.com. That is my production company within the kink scene, and has my podcast, Dear Jazzie. It has all my links. It has all of Fawny's links. Fawny ABDL is the co-host of my show. Also contains links to all the other shows that are on our network and everything that we do in the community. So @oddswithgod.com.
Link in the description box down below. Okay, so we got all the cordial shenanigans out of the way. Let's jump into the question shenanigans. Are you down to clown?
Indeed.
Or rather, are you down to suit up?
Oh, I am. I tried to come up with a witty comeback, but my brain stopped working halfway through that process. So yes, I'm ready to begin.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so question 1, worth $100 dues. How did you get into fursuiting?
So I got into fursuiting. Well, it took me a while to get my fursuit. I became a furry in 2008. And I didn't get my fursuit until 2015, 2016, maybe even 2017. I don't know. But it was a long time. Fursuits are really, really big investments, and they're, very bespoke, very special commissions that you take or that you purchase, I suppose. It's a commission that you don't necessarily buy a great amount of over the course of your life. So every time you get to do it, it is, it's a very special thing. I got into fursuiting, excuse me, mainly because I was in the furry fandom for a while, and I got to watch the evolution of fursuit making, because different techniques ebb and flow out of popularity. Different styles become popular, just like fashion. And I just saw it as because my persona is, and this is kind of jumping into the next question a little bit, I do apologize, but my persona is very much and I feel like a lot of furries will answer this the same way, is a reflection of a certain part of my personality that I sometimes have trouble bearing because it's a very like vulnerable, very special part of myself that I don't always have the confidence to show to others. But when I suit up, and this is part of why I got into fursuiting in the first place, is, you know, when I suit up, I'm able to be the character that I normally only see on a computer screen or see fan art of on the internet. And I get to, you know, put on a suit and very easily access like that very special part of my personality and share it with others, where normally I'd only be able to just kind of like experience it in the private. And I'm sorry, my brain my brain shut down again. Only really experience it in like the solitude of my house, because even though I'm a podcaster, I'm actually a very private, very introverted person, funny enough. And so being able to get into suit, that kind of like I don't know, it's kind of like switching into an alter ego, as it were. Like I'm able to be something and someone that I'm not normally. And that's what really attracted me to fursuiting, apart from like, oh, I can just become my persona and run around and be a blue internet dog at a convention. That sounds great.
You talking about at the from home to conventions. Whenever I saw you at Cap 23 in your fursuit, and I came up to you and gave you a big giant hug, that's like my favorite thing to do with people who have suits, because I don't know, I feel like giving them a hug is like a huge. I mean, this is just my opinion. You can tell me if I'm wrong or not, but I feel like giving them a hug is like a huge like validating moment where like you feel as cute as you think you look.
Absolutely. 100%. Giving us, very specifically interacting with littles in fursuit, is one of my favorite things to do in suit, just because it's like, you know, you can kind of be like, you know, like the mascot, like a Disneyland mascot, as it were, and just put like a huge smile on littles' faces.
Oh yeah.
And then that also just kind of puts you into like your, like there is a very specific kind of headspace that a lot of people get in fursuit. It's not exactly like Pet Space, but it's at least adjacent to it. It's like Pet Space without a DS element.
Gotcha. So your fursuit, it's incredibly magical. I
Well,
absolutely
thank
love it,
you.
and like some of the art you've had commissioned that matches your suit, and the some of the art that you have given me to turn into cards for you for padding power. It just, to me, this goes into the next question of personality. Like how does that reflect on like your persona, your personality? How does, whenever you don the suit, whenever you become Batman, as it were, the alter ego, like how does that make you feel? How does that result, like reflect your personality? And like does a certain more because you said you're primarily more introverted, do you feel more extroverted in the suit? Just walk us through that. Like, how does it make you feel, like with your personality and in general?
I definitely feel less introverted in suit. I won't go as far to say I am extroverted, but I'm definitely less introverted. um, my persona, and I can send you my fur affinity that has like a bunch of images that you can throw up on screen, perhaps. But my persona, she is a husky. Her primary colors are like this light sky blue, and then with a white tummy, and then like some darker blue accent lines and some stars on her thighs. She is very, very fluffy. She's very huggable. She has like a lot of like, you know, like when dogs are like when a snow dog is in the winter and their neck floof is like all floofy and everything. She's very fluffy, very soft, very snuggly, very not very barky, as it were, I think is a good way to put it. And that kind of like gets into my pet space a little bit too. It's like, you know, yes I'm a like a dog and a puppy, but not in like a rough housing, let's mosh kind of way. Kind of like in a, oh, I'm still too small to play with other dogs, so I'm going to curl up in a lap type situation.
Aww.
Yeah.
Little Jazzy curled up in someone's lap. That is an adorable visual.
Yeah, exactly. So That's kind of I'm not sure if that's exactly how I feel in suit, but I definitely feel like, when I'm in suit, I'm much more apt to like run around, and I'll have like I usually have bells, like jingly bells, like one on my collar, one on my tail, so that when I run around, it creates like a multi-sensory effect. And that's very because, as a lot of people know, and as I talk about on my show, I have the tism. I've got the rhythm with the tism, as it were. And so that's like a very stimmy experience of like, oh, I'm going to jump up and down and create a bunch of jingly effects. And then as a result, everyone around me thinks that's cute, independent of the enjoyment that I'm already having. And so there's like this almost like an element of compersion in a way
I love how
of like
you.
me doing my thing, like brings joy to onlookers, and there's something that feels cool about that.
It is really cool. I love how you bring up the Riz of the Tism because
Yeah.
from one Tismite to another,
Hey.
just having those additional things, it makes just a world of difference. It's
Mhm.
amazing. So I got to ask you this. It's not on the question list. So pop question here.
Sure.
Does the theology or the life motto of if I fits I sits work with whenever you're in your suit? Because you said you're a lap dog.
It's IRL, it's a little bit, because it's like, I'm like I don't want to say like I'm built, but like, I'm a athletically built person, so I try not to like sit on too many laps without like at least asking first. But like,
Of
if
course,
consent is given and everything, I will absolutely sit if I fits.
because consent is key, kids. Remember that.
It sure is.
I love that. I love that if you fits, you sits. That is adorable.
Ye-
So crossing over, you mentioned kind of pet or pup space earlier. Does it cross? And I kind of already know the answer to this question based on some of the art I've seen, but for our audience sake, does your persona cross into ABDL or into little space? And if so, how does that happen?
he sure does. And I think I feel like a lot of baby furs will feel a similar way when I say this, but my persona crosses into ABDL because, Jasmine Starshine, the person, am an ABDL. I am also a furry. I have a fursona. And, that's still a part of like my human experience. And so me being an ABDL who has a fursona, like and my persona is kind of like a reflection of certain parts of my personality. For me, I feel like it's almost natural for my persona to have a baby first side to her, just like I have. Like, I am myself and I am ABDL. I'm not sure if I articulated that very well, but hopefully the point got across.
No, you explained it beautifully. So how did that happen?
Just very naturally. A lot of people talk about their ABDL origins, and I'm one of the people where it was like, I don't necessarily have an origin. I've just always been this way. I just never grew out of certain things when I was growing up. And so like my ABDL side was always there throughout my entire life. Like I was just simply never done with certain things. And so when I discovered the furry fandom, it was just like, oh, cool. Just going to incorporate this into my life as well. It's like ABDL is one of like it's like a fundamental truth of like my existence. Like it's like the laws of thermodynamics kind of like make the understanding of our universe go. ABDL is like a fundamental part of like me. Just like being a furry is just like a fundamental aspect of me. And so all those things can kind of like blend into each other while also existing as their own independent things, but also are like inherent to each other, like scaffolding up like a whole structure of personality and experience.
I love that. It's a core part of you.
Exactly.
So, what emotions do you feel when you're suited up? Are they a mixture of both fursona only, or little, or is it a mix, or is it always a mix?
It's definitely a bit of a mix. Everything, I like to feel like, I don't know, and this is kind of getting into philosophy a little bit, but I like myself best as a person when I feel like all of my emotions are kind of like flowing into each other in a kind of like fluidic state. Like I am, I have all my emotions in equilibrium with each other and they can all take their turns floating to the forefront of my personality, and they all have their own time in the sun. And when I am in suit, like it's kind of like putting on, Tony Stark putting on the Iron Man suit. It's just like, okay, then the very last thing is the head. Let's rock. And so it's like, I put on the body, my paws, tail, I have the arm sleeves, and when I get to the head, it's just like, okay, here we go, because I have an electronic ventilation system in there, so there actually is like an element and a controller board and buttons
So you
to
have Jarvis
operate.
essentially in your suit.
Not quite. Hopefully, I have one day, just like as a joke, I'll have like an Amazon Echo in there, just as like a meme, maybe. But I do have like an electronic system in there with buttons, and so when I, put on the head, it's like a space marine putting on their helmet. Of just like, it kind of gets me amped up. It's just like, all right, that was the last piece. I am now in suit. Let's get out of this hotel room and walk around. And there's like an excitement factor of like, okay, I went through all the effort. Now let's go do something.
I love that. So
Mhm.
now that we're in the suit, we have become Darth Vader.
Mhm.
How long can you suit?
I can suit for, I think the longest I've ever suited straight was about 6 hours or so, and that was at a furry convention that had a fursuit lounge. If at a convention like Capcom that doesn't necessarily have a dedicated fursuit lounge, I'm able to go for like maybe 3 4 hours tops, and then go back to the room to recharge, and then go back out. Um, the most important things when you're fursuiting, or at least for me, is access to water. And then I try to keep like, it's funny. Furries actually invented like a bendy straw, like a standard plastic bendy straw, except it's just super long. And so the idea is it can fit all the way through the mouth of your head into your real mouth, and then the other end sits in like a giant like cup of ice water. And so you can just continually drink lots of water without getting out of suit, which is super convenient. But the other thing for me and for suitors that have electronic systems integrated into their suits is access to like a USB-C charger, to where we can quite literally recharge our batteries while sitting down.
Nice. The elements with fursuits, with having the longevity and the ability, obviously is staying cool. And you mentioned fans in your head. Some people I have seen, like at Mid South Fur. I can never remember the acronym for what happens here in Memphis. The FurCon that happens here in Memphis every year. Anyways, a gentleman who I saw, he had an ice vest. It was literally a
Yeah.
tactical vest that he
Hmm.
had somehow made ice packs into it. And
Yeah.
like, do you have anything like that? Have you seen anything like that? Would that be beneficial to you, like to extend your suit time?
So funny enough, that was also invented by furries. It's called Easy Cooldown, and I remember when it first came out, it was like, I think I want to say like 2009 or 2010 when it first came out, and it was initially marketed to the community. And I've wanted one for some time, but every time it's like, oh yeah, that exists. It's just like been in a time where it's like I don't have a lot of clients and I can't justify the purchase. Like, damn it. But one day I will have an easy cooldown vest. But what's really funny about those is that uh, easy cooldown vests are actually used by like construction workers, like some military operators, and like people that work in like very, like stereotypically not very little, not very kid, not, jobs that you wouldn't normally expect. And so it's just like, oh, performers, mascot wearers, people in the military, construction workers, fursuiters. It's just like one of those funny things where it's just like, oh yeah, a furry made that. And it's, further confirmation that it's just like, we do indeed run the world.
Yes, yes. Inventors. Inventors and
Inventors, IT admins, we have it all.
we have it all. So you kind of touched on money a second ago. And if it's not comfortable to discuss, what is the for your suit and everything in it? How big is that investment?
So my suit, altogether, I don't have a bodysuit. Instead, I have a custom-made kigurumi of my character's, I guess, pelt pattern, as it were, and that takes the role of a standard bodysuit. Eventually, I do want a bodysuit, but that is, the second most expensive part of a suit. So everything that I have at the time that I bought it, because everything is now adjusted for inflation now, I spent around $2,000 for my suit. If I were to convert to today dollars, which is, oh my god, almost 10 years later, what the hell? Um, oh gosh, what would that be? Maybe like 2,500 or 3,000, just to account for inflation. And also, the furry community has been, doing a lot better at like paying people what they deserve and everything. So
Right.
everything that I have, I would easily pay like 2,500 or 3,000 plus tip for.
So this investment, obviously, you want to make sure it lasts for a long time. And you say 10 years for something that you wear for a few hours a time. What, maybe once or twice a month, or like when you go to cons. But any based on the time frame that you've had it in the 10 years, how do you care for a fursuit like that? The head, the legs, or the hands and whatnot. Like, walk us through that.
So there's a meme in the community where it's you just scream, brush your suit, and there's truth to it. Like you do need to brush out your fursuit. The way that I take care of mine is I mix a little solution of like 50% water, 50% isopropyl alcohol, and then a couple drops of whatever essential oil I want my suit to smell like. And then after a con, I'll just like let it all air out, spray it down with alcohol, let that just get in and then evaporate off so everything is disinfected. Because stank comes from sweat, and it comes from stagnant sweat growing bacteria. So
Right.
the whole idea is just air it out, get it disinfected, sprayed down, smelling good, all that good stuff. And then just taking the time to brush through all the fur. And it doesn't need to be hard, but just enough to like, it helps to get all of the alcohol kind of like into the fibers, and it gets everything like all smooth and keeps it from getting matted. Kind of like having a real animal, honestly. Because there are definitely people that I've seen, and this is not a slam. There's definitely people that I've seen in fursuit that don't brush their suits, and you can tell that they have never brushed their suit, possibly for years, and it unfortunately shows. And this is, if this is you that I'm unintentionally talking about, go brush your suit. You will thank me. Your experience will be on the whole better.
So, the obviously, like you said, sweat and things happen. What do you do in this instance of, like, let's just say you get really hot, and obviously, no matter what orifice we as humans have, it is capable of stinking. Like, do you ever have to deep clean your suit? Like, obviously you can't just throw it in the washing machine and call it a day and put it in the dryer, right?
Right. Yeah, no. Fursuits are very specifically hand wash only, unless they are very specifically made to be machine washable, but that is very, very, very rare and very expensive.
Okay.
Primarily hand wash only. I personally have not had to deep clean my suit. I'm very thankful for that. The farthest I've ever gone is just like outside alcohol spray down, turned everything inside out, inside spray down, and then that has always been good enough for me in my personal situations. But that's also just, your mileage may vary.
What about, let's just say you don't get a chance to use or wear your suit for like 3 months? Can you just pop it out of the closet and throw it on, or do you need to brush it beforehand? Or and this is post the last time you cleaned it.
So once it's all like dried out and everything, that's when I feel comfortable putting Jazzie back in her box. Generally, a fursuit that is brushed will stay brushed if it's in storage. But I still like every time I take it out, I like give it a sniff, give it an inspection, just make sure everything is fine. But generally, I don't have to do a ton of maintenance other than recharging all the batteries. And then like checking all the solder joints to make sure everything is still soldered and everything's good to go in that regard.
Very cool. So this is kind of going back to an original question I'd asked you earlier, but maybe it can translate a little bit differently. When you're in your suit, are there times in which you feel big physically, like you intentionally want to feel big, or do you want to feel intentionally small? In the physically feeling, and then mentally, like where are you at when the suit is in? Like, are you more little when you're in the suit, or are you more doggo when you're in the suit?
I think it depends. If I'm feeling doggo, I'm definitely feeling like small, like as in like I want someone to be there to look out for me, and that is usually the fursuit handler, which is I can't believe I'm just now getting around to handlers, but I definitely, whenever I'm in the suit, I really like being in proximity to one of my friends, one of my people, as it were. But when it comes to kind of like my positionality, I think it just depends on the vibe of the particular day. Like there are definitely times where I'm in suit and I want to like entertain littles and like be funny and exciting and silly and make littles laugh and everything. And there's other times where it's like I'm in suit and I want to be like on all fours, like either in a lap or building blocks, or it just is totally dependent on the vibe of the day, honestly.
I get that. So when you're in your suit, and this is going back to the big side, and by big I don't mean by like you're big Jazzy. I'm talking about like, do you ever just feel so powerful in your suit you just want to be like Godzilla and just like knock down buildings and stuff?
The idea definitely does appeal. There have been more than one like, okay, we're done, all right, let's knock over the block tower, and and blocks go everywhere, and it definitely hits different when you're in suit. A common activity at furry conventions is there will usually be like a room, usually in like the fursuit lounge or the fursuit playground, where they'll have like a bunch of boxes with Sharpie drawings of like windows and doors. So it's like a giant like downtown metropolis, and you can pretend to be like a kaiju and knock them over, and that's always good fun.
I would pay to see this, especially pay to see you do that. Okay, so on to a more spicier topic.
Sure.
There's really no good way to phrase this. So when in fursuit, how naughty can things get? Where does that go?
Things can get extremely naughty. Things can get extremely naughty in fursuits. Wink. If you understood that joke, you're a furry. Congratulations.
I got that reference.
um, excuse me. I personally, fursuit sex is not really a thing for me personally because my sex life is very monogamous and my partner is not a furry. But that's okay. Like it's not something that's like, oh, I need to have fursuit sex. I feel repressed. But it's just like, oh yeah, that's a thing that exists, but it's just not a thing currently in my life right now, and that's okay. Um, it's funny because fursuit sex used to be like so taboo. It's just like, don't talk about it or the normies will hear you. Oh, don't tell anyone you have sex in your fursuit. Oh, but I feel like the attitude towards fursuit sex has really just relaxed. um People are just like it, as the world and as the community becomes a lot more sex positive over time. I think it's just like, oh man, two or more consenting adults having relations and they're wearing silly costumes. Oh no. Like, who cares, right? Like,
Yeah,
there's so much worse stuff going on in the world that it's just like, who cares? People have weird sex.
exactly. How do you think I guess fursuiting and BDSM and pup play, how do you think all those things cross pollinate with each other? And do you think they all have the same or similar origins?
I think well, the origins of furry, as it were, go back to prehistoric and even like some proto-human history. Like, for as long as there have been humans and humanoids, there have been cave drawings of anthropomorphic hybrid human animals. Like, that is innate to our species. Our species has always dared to imagine, like, what if we were animals but bipedal and sentient as humans are. Like, that is just so inherent to the human experience, and I could talk for hours about the anthropology of that. And also, sex is another thing that is extremely, like, ingrained into the human experience. Go figure. Unless someone is asexual, obviously I have to point that out. But I feel like furry and BDSM may not have necessarily a common denominator. I feel like in modern examples, I really feel like, and this is going back to my soapbox of furries run the world. I really feel like a lot of things that become accepted into society are usually like accepted in the furry fandom first in some ways. Uh, like, for example, like, the furry fandom was a safe haven for queer adults long before gay marriage was legalized. The furry fandom was a place for gender exploration far before the West had an understanding of trans people and trans rights, for example. Like, we are, as a community, very, 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 like, on the whole, progressive and forward thinking, and obviously we have like our contingency of stupid people with stupid opinions, but those people are generally and rightfully pushed to the edges of the community where they just kind of do their own sad, disgruntled little thing. But and the BDSM community is also really based in that mutual understanding of, we're all weird, let's be weird together and compare and contrast our respective weirdnesses to learn more about ourselves and about humanity. And so in that regard, I feel like BDSM and the furry fandom, uh, in modernity, in praxis, they share a lot of DNA in being open, accepting, sex positive, weird, full of people who are neurodiverse, full of queer people. They share a lot of DNA, and I feel like I feel like pup play isn't necessarily inherently related to the furry fandom, because I do know a lot of pups that are very much like, I am not a furry. Please do not refer to me as such. I have no ill feelings about the community, but that's just not me. And so, and I also know a lot of furries that are just like, I am not a pup player or I am not a pet player. Please do not refer to me as such, even though I have nothing against the scene. And so when it comes to the very specific crossover point of pet play, there are a ton of furries who do like pet play, but it's not like a one-to-one install base, basically.
I gotcha. So rolling back now to the baby fur side of things, how do you think that got started?
I'm sorry. Again, brain farted. My apologies.
You're fine. So, like, rolling back to we were talking about the origins a second ago.
Right.
How do you think baby furs got started then?
How baby fur got started is people who were ABDLs early on in the scene were also furries. And then, peanut butter and jelly equals peanut butter and jelly sandwich. 2 + 2 is 4. Bada bing. I really honestly do think it is that simple. Like some of the earliest baby furs ever were simply, adult babies who just happened to also be furries and said, wouldn't it be cute if I made my fursona a child? And there it is, and that's it. I honestly think that is the origin of the baby fur scene, as it were. And then obviously it grew and evolved into like its own beautiful thing, its own part of the furry fandom, not a subset, but its own facet of the furry fandom itself. It's really grown and become, intrinsically integrated into furry and almost like immutably attached to and a part of furry as a whole. Like there's a joke of quote unquote the baby fur mafia. Baby fur mafia is a very real thing, and the concept of it is that is that all the major conventions, a lot of the big fursuit makers, a lot of the big companies within the scene are all run by baby furs. Baby furs are in board meetings, they are in server rooms, we are everywhere. Just as furries are everywhere. Wherever there are furries, there are baby furs. And it's I forget where I read the statistic, but some years ago, I read that ABDL was the third most popular fetish behind I think it was feet and something else, but ABDL was number 3. Like we are a very, very huge community. Even if the people who are largely into it don't know that there is a ABDL community, either through repression or just not ever searching it on the internet. But and like I was saying, like furries being like intrinsically connected to humanity and saying that we are everywhere, and then also saying that ABDLs are everywhere. Both of the things are everywhere and they work really well together. And in my mind, it's not too much of a logical leap to assume that by extension, baby furs are everywhere.
You
And
talk about
so,
us. Go ahead. Go ahead.
oh no, that was it. That was what I was trying to articulate.
Oh, I was gonna say you talk about us being number 3. I mean, 3 is my favorite number, but guys, let's hit that number 1 spot. Let's be number 1.
I was going to say we gotta get those numbers up.
Yeah. He was number 1, Mr. Krabs.
He was number 1.
Okay. Big question for your fur suiting adventures and shenanigans. How clutch are poof poofs while fursuiting?
Diapers are clutch. They are very clutch. They come in handy. There are a lot of fursuiters who are not ABDL, not little, not baby fur, not anything, who will still use diapers just because it is so much of a hassle to completely like extract yourself from a fursuit, pee, get all the way back in, and then get back onto the floor. Because when you're in suit, you're constantly drinking water. And if you're not, you should be. And so what happens when you're constantly drinking water, you have to pee. And so it is like, being padded is almost like part of part of putting on my fursuit, just because like it is so important and so convenient and so easy and makes the experience just honestly way more convenient and efficient. Like outside of like, ooh woo, I feel small and cute and this makes me feel tiny and comfortable and everything. Like it is just logistically the correct decision to make.
So they come in clutch, and obviously it's handy to not have to jump out of your suit. Do you apply this for 1s and 2s, or are you out of the suit at number 2?
Generally out of the suit for number two, but that's also just how that's just generally how I am on the whole. Like I generally don't go into the messing range of experiences. But that's just me, and that's no shade against anyone who is really, really into that. That's
Of
just like
course.
not a thing for me, and that's okay.
No.
But for people who who absolutely utilize their diapers in that way, it can be very, very helpful in that regard. But also, it's still one of the things where it's just like if messing on the con floor, it's generally polite and a good idea to get that taken care of. If not post haste, with some with a medium sense of urgency.
Of
And
course, because you don't want to offend
yeah,
other people's senses.
yeah, exactly. And also, it is different. And this is important. I feel to say, um, if someone has a difference in ability, that's an entirely separate question. I'm very, very specifically speaking through the lens of if someone is otherwise able to control their bowel movements, that is generally the modum operandi.
Of course, yes. And with other, keeping in mind other people abilities, 100%. That's definitely a
Mhm.
great, respectful, and honestly very compassionate approach with that. Okay, we have covered a ton in fursuiting, and honestly, I think it's one of the coolest things I've seen at Capcom. I remember, seeing you at 2023, seeing my brother Ducky in his suit. Just, it's honestly one of the neatest things I've seen Capcom allow and incorporate because, before, I want to say Capcom 2020, fursuiting was a no go. And
Mhm.
they viewed it as a security risk. I can understand why.
Mhm.
And now I want to say Summer Cap 23 and 24, which I unfortunately missed. But I feel like seeing fursuiting being more and more welcome at Cap in spaces where it wasn't necessarily a thing. I think it's one of the really cool things, and I really love seeing the cross pollination of these different kinks. And there was something that me and J Baby were talking about with leather earlier in another episode about how ABDL and furries cross. And I'd like to close with this topic, and that is my first experience at a fur con was circa 2012. And anyways, of course, me being a little and not knowing about really much about baby furs back then. This was well before my presence being online as a what's the word to use, a personality, I
Mhm.
guess,
Sure.
was a thing. And when I went, I noticed there was one other little there. This is the first time I met one of my local friends, Zen, and he's a baby for himself, and he you could definitely tell he was wearing a poof poof, but he was being shunned by people, and I just happened to show up in just vanilla clothes and a poof poof, and I was very discreet, so you couldn't tell unless you were like hardcore looking at my booty,
Mhm.
so that was 12 years ago. What was the furry community like in your time in it? Whenever, like, because you said earlier that this has just been an intrinsic part of you since day one, ever since day one, and how is ABDL and the furry fandom clash? 'Cause I have seen it where a lot of furries who I followed on Twitter in the beginning, who I thought were cool and they were cute. I loved their persona, and then all of a sudden one day they just post like this super anti ABDL tweet, and I'm just like, instant like just happiness buzzkill right there. What is your
Yeah.
experience with that in your time? Because you live in both communities,
Mhm.
so how has that made you feel over the years? And do you feel that ABDL and the furry fandom has become more accepting?
The scene has become wildly more accepting than it was. I remember 12 years ago, and then even before, logging onto Fur Affinity, it was not uncommon to see, like on the front page of recently submitted, it was not uncommon at all to see art depicting acts of violence against baby fur characters and specific people's personas just because the artist hated baby furs and ABDLs.
Why do you think that
And
is?
honestly, I think for some people it might be projection. For some people, I think it might be posturing. I definitely think that there's an element of posturing of, and this is true with a lot of online communities of just like, I have to put on a show to show everyone, I have to be very loud and clear about my opinions because I have to like, I can't have incorrect opinions. I don't want to get canceled. I have to be so loud about like I hate baby furs, onga bunga. You know what I mean? And so I really think it's some people feel the need that they have to be so incredibly vocal about it, and then some people are, just I don't know. I just feel like at like a certain age, people are just full of piss and vinegar, and they just need something to fight against, and so they see an easy target, and they're like, they're predators. Oh, bad. Oh, and they latch on to like this cause because they need something to fight for or against. They need something to like rally around, and I don't get it personally. Like I'm not someone who lives my life, based on like, I need like a greater purpose bigger than myself. I need to like fight. I need to do something, I'm an adult with a mortgage and a marriage. I'm more worried about like the goings on of our world. You know what I mean? I've, I know that what I'm doing, I'm not doing anything wrong. And all pretty much any ABDL, any baby fur you talk to, they know they're not doing anything wrong. So it's like whenever I see someone, being very loud and proud about how much they hate ABDLs, if you look at their profile, I guarantee it's going to say like 19 or 20 or like 22 at the most. Because it's just like, I remember what it's like being a very young adult. At the time, I was a straight edge punk rocker, in a punk rock band, sleeping on top of amps in my crappy punk rock van. And it's just like, yeah, I remember what it's like to be like young and scrappy and part of like a subculture and like having big opinions and everything. And so I think that's where a lot of like the hatred comes from. And as people kind of grow and mature and their brains become fully developed, they realize like, oh, consenting adults wearing diapers are actually not that big of a deal in comparison to everything else going on in our world.
So, in the last 12 years, when you've gone to just strictly fur cons in any location across the US, what is what is the evolution of inclusion and acceptance and love towards baby furs with regular furries?
It's gone from when I joined the community to where baby furs could be like attacked at a convention sometimes to there are now like ABU is now one of the big dealers at Midwest Fur Fest, which is the biggest furry convention in the world. And they have like a massive booth and a massive presence there. It's gone from, baby fur needing to hide away basically and being the butt of every single joke to, baby fur art vendors having their trade binders and having their art binders and commission prices just out on their tables in the dealer stand, which is fantastic to see. And I'm one of the people that like I very firmly believe like the queer community, like kink has a place at Pride, and kink is very inherent to Pride. That's just who I am as a person. Like I intrinsically believe that kink belongs at Pride. And so for adults to be able to like live our adult lives without having to like, oh, we're going to hide ourselves away and like we're no one can see like you're a evil sinner and impure, how dare you. And it's just like we have our own adult spaces where we can do our own adult things, and that feels just very liberating to where it's like it's no longer a secret of just like 8 people in one hotel room having like a tiny quiet party, to where it's now like we have I mean, there's people that own their own like properties, like real estate properties. They're just dedicated to ABDL, to the community. We have our tons of like our own conventions. We have a bunch of our own meetups. And so I really feel like the furry fandom has done a lot of growing and a lot of evolving in really like kind of getting over itself. Because at a certain point, it's just like, well, we might be weird. We dress up as animals and we have personas, but at least we're not as weird as those people. And it's gone to more of a, oh, let's all be weird together. And the people that are like super loud and brash, like, oh, we hate baby furs, like their numbers are getting like smaller and smaller by the day. It's just like, it's like the people in the United States that have very mean opinions about people. There's like statistically like not as many of them. They're just so loud. One of those things.
I gotcha. And like, you know, my first experience at a furry convention where it was definitely very anti ABDL. In fact, my friend that I mentioned earlier, they had asked him to essentially change clothes or leave.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And then the following year, I didn't go because I had to work. And my friend Tyler had told me that someone who was in like little clothes got just the absolute crap beat out of them. And you know, I thought he was exaggerating, but then you know, Zen verified that story, and I was like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah. I have not heard of anything like that happening in some years. And I'm very, very happy about that. Like,
I am
we've
too.
come a very long way from how everything had to be squirreled away and hidden away, while everyone else is allowed to have their debauchery, but we're not allowed to have our debauchery, to where it's like there are now dedicated panels at the biggest conventions just devoted to us. And the panels are, being allocated resources like extra security, because the people who run the conventions are baby furs themselves and are doing what they can to protect. And I feel like that has really added to, you know, a bit more of a positive perception, because it showed the furries as like, oh, maybe we shouldn't be so mean if their panel needs armed security in order to function properly. Maybe we shouldn't be so toxic to the baby furs anymore.
Yes, I'm very glad that changed because whether it was a regular furry wanting to come to Capcom, like open arms, my guy, like come on in, you know.
Mhm.
And I think that's great, and it's inclusion. I think inclusion is important, and I really love how a lot of communities in kink are starting to be more accepting of ABDL and starting to cross pollinate a little bit more, and effectively ABDL vanilla people who were just like just in BDSM or leather or baby fur are now, or other furry are now crossing over, and we're kind of melding together, and I think that's a really cool evolution of our respective communities, and honestly I hope it continues to grow that way.
Yeah, when I joined my local dungeon here in Cleveland, it was when we joined and we were getting the tour of the facility. They're like, "Oh, and this room is new. This is our Little's nursery. This is like brand new." Everyone's like, "Whoa," because we were the first dungeon in the area, in a very large area, to have a dedicated space for ABDLs and littles. And that was, oh gosh, when was that? Like 2018, 2019, maybe. And that was when the BDSM community, a lot of the old guard were trying to, they were trying to reason with, here's this very soft, very caring, very not traditional impact play oriented expression of the DS dynamic entering our space. What do we do with this? And there were a lot of people who were very like hardcore traditionalists in the BDSM scene. They were just like, no, this is no part of our community. It's too soft. There's not enough leather. There's not enough beating the hell out of a sub and not giving aftercare. I don't like this. And then there were more people in the BDSM scene that looked at us and said, oh, cool, more weird people, come on in. And so that's why I think ABDL and BDSM get on so well, is because the BDSM scene really saw, the ABDL scene and the baby fur scene and also the furry scene. The BDSM scene really saw us getting wailed on, and they said like, "Hey, look, fellow weirdos," and they just kind of brought us in, and now we're just like a big happy family of communities of weirdos in a way, and we cross pollinate with each other all the time, and I think that's really beautiful.
It really is, and I'm sure there are other places who are a bit behind, and I hope they catch up. My local dungeon is actually starting to catch up, and hopefully that continues to to go. In closing, what advice do you have people who battle with ABDL and being a baby fur? Do you any advice you want to give to people who feel guilty or feel a pull or just feel confused because they don't know what they want?
My honest advice is just be weird and be proud of being weird, because it shows that you're unique and you have your own personality and your own goals and desires and your own humanity, your own personality. Like, you are uniquely you. And look at that, we're tying it into Be True, Be You, the name of the show.
Stay true and stay you. Exactly.
Stay true, stay you. There we go. My apologies.
Oh, you're fine.
But honestly, that's my advice, of just like find people that vibe with your energy and stick with them, and really just like allow yourself to build a space where you can feel validated and safe, and you can express parts of your personality that you can't express anywhere else, and allow that experience to make you a better person. That's what I would say.
Beautifully summed up and said. I love it. 10 out of 10.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for coming on the show. I greatly appreciate it. This is a fantastic, a monumental episode, and we're just getting starting, folks, here in the Stay True and Stay You podcast. I have to give a quick shout out to Jazzie here for coming on. And Jazzie, you kind of inspired me to get back into the podcast game, because I had a podcast years and years ago, and it kind of fell off because I just didn't feel like I had the right footing to do it. But now here we are. 10 years later, and I feel like I'm starting off strong. So I owe you some thanks for and this is not just for the pomp and circumstance of the show to close it, but this is truly coming from me. I do owe you a great deal of thanks for helping me get this back on the road. Like, it means the world to me that you come on here and that you do what you do on your podcast and your show, and all the good you do for the community. It's really awesome.
It really, really does mean a lot. Again, like we were saying at the beginning of, I never fully understand the scope of what I do, because in my mind, it's just, I look at my keyboard, I look at my mic, I look at the soundboard, I look at the screen, and that's what I see. But I don't think I'll ever truly see what I do beyond those things. But hearing people like you say, like, how what I do affects them, I don't know, it just renders me speechless, and it really does mean a lot to me. And I don't know, thank you so much. I don't know what else to, I'm speechless.
Well, those
are very kind words. Thank you.
I mean them from the bottom of my heart, because you do a crazy amount of good for the community, and that's what I hope I will continue to do. I've been at this for 10 years, and hopefully, depending on how much of my mental batteries last, I can continue to do this for maybe another 10 years. Who knows?
Here's hoping. Yeah.
But anyways, thank you so much, Jazzie. I greatly appreciate you coming on the show. Be sure and check out Jazzie's links, which I will link her website in the description box below. And if you haven't already, be sure and subscribe to the Stay True and Stay You podcast, and check out all of our links in the description box below. Follow us on social media. And if you want to support the podcast, be sure and check out Subscribestar, which you can find in the link description box below. As always, thank you so much for listening. And until next time, guys, good night, boons.